The indie gaming scene in particular has, over the years, demonstrated an unbelievable amount of reverence for three very specific titles: Metroid, Castlevania,
Oh God! He flew forward! I didn't mean to jump forward like that.
Into the abyss I go!
and Dark Souls. I get it. You hear the descriptors indie pixel art, roguelike, Souls-like, or Metroidvania, and you utter a guttural moan at the prospect. There's just so many of them nowadays that it's become a meme of sorts, a lighthearted jab towards the onset of a new entry in these popular genres. Some critics get burnt out by it, understandably, particularly when they're sent out hundreds of codes for these games a month. This channel isn't at the point where developers are contacting me rather than I them, so I don't really suffer from that sort of fatigue, and I hope that regardless, I won't. I suppose, however, at the end of the day, all of us critics and reviewers are equally subjected to hundreds of these games one way or another, and so all any of us can do is hope that you'll trust us when we say that one out of those hundreds stands out. And so today, through broken glasses, we look at Dead Cells. These are cells. Red blood cells, to be specific, perhaps getting pumped to your heart while you consider calling or folding in a high-stakes game of poker, or while you go for a jog around the block. This is how you begin every game in Motion Twin's debut Rogue-vania. Well, not exactly. You're sort of dead. A mass of moldy green coagulation that, for whatever reason, gets scooped up and dumped into a chute like a stack of dirty laundry. The chute leads to the prisoner's cells, the dank underground dungeon beneath a castle located on a mysterious island. It's here that you find a corpse to inhabit, the decrepit body of some fallen adventurer, and from there, you proceed to try and make your way out, hopefully before you're killed and dumped back into the chute to try again. Dead Cells is pretty light on its narrative, currently taking a Dark Souls-esque approach by telling you nothing and occasionally introducing the odd NPC who will share a few cynical words about your predicament, namely that you cannot die and no one knows why. Items do possess flavor text, but nothing in the way of lore, however concrete or subtle. For now, we're forced to wonder. At the beginning of a run, all you have is your starting sword and the option of a basic bow or shield as your offhand weapon. I'm told that eventually, as development continues, these options will grow to 5, giving the player access to a few more basic variants, such as a broadsword, mace, crossbow, things of that nature. The more you play the game, the more diverse these options will become. So let's talk about progression first, as that's usually the deciding factor for most people, and then we'll see if combat makes it worth it. Dead Cells is a roguelite featuring permanent upgrades whose effects will carry over between runs. There are 2 currencies in the game, gold and cells. Gold is used to buy from secret shops and purchase entry into rooms with special items, but cells are the precious commodity. They're what you spend in order to unlock new weapons and passive utilitarian upgrades that may dictate how often you can drink from your health flask or how much gold you carry over after death. Between each level is a sort of safe room where the clock is paused and you can interact with a being known as the Collector, with whom you can exchange your acquired cells for these upgrades. Die before you reach this room, and you lose all of the cells you've earned. The Collector has a wide range of passives and weapons for you to work towards unlocking. Upgrades such as the aforementioned flask and gold passives will unlock permanently, while newly unlocked advanced weapons, which are special themed variations of their basic counterparts, will be available for immediate use and then can be found as random drops during subsequent runs. Enemies will also drop blueprints of varying rarities for these new weapons, which, like cells, will be lost if you die before you make it to the Collector and the blueprint is added. Blueprints are assigned to specific enemy types, so for example, the blueprint for the Hunter's longbow will drop from bow-wielding enemies, while the blueprint for Lightning Bolt, one of my favorite weapons, will drop from the mages encountered in the ramparts. Once a weapon is unlocked, you can continue to invest cells to upgrade its base damage bonus, a bonus that is then applied to any incarnation of that weapon you find. Now, what I mean by that is that weapons have different classes, a higher class of a weapon being more likely to drop in later, more difficult levels. In the prisoner cells, you might find a Class 1 Hunter's longbow, while later in the ramparts, you might find a Class 4 variant that does far more damage. I'm told that by the end, Motion Twin hopes to have upwards of 70 different advanced variations of the basic weapon types. Another form of progression is the acquisition of runes, which are permanent upgrades applied the moment they are earned. Dead Cells is as much a Metroid-vania as it is a roguelite, but it is still a roguelite, which means in order to see everything there is to see in any given stage, you will have to die in order to backtrack. In this case, I couldn't climb to certain areas of the prisoner cells until I defeated the elite archer in the ramparts who possessed the appropriate rune which would allow it. Death and starting over was the only way to return to the cells and see what laid beyond my reach. This is how Motion Twin makes good on their promise that death will unlock new paths through the game, as unlocked abilities and powers will allow you to circumnavigate levels and thus reach your goal not necessarily faster, but through different means. While not available to do in the build I was given, use of the Vine rune could grant you access to entirely different stages, which all eventually lead to the same boss on the Black Bridge. So, is the combat enjoyable enough to be worth all this trouble? The answer is yes. Motion Twin describes Dead Cells' approach to combat as being Souls-like, in that weapons, spells, enemies, and bosses all possess unique patterns in their movement that can be studied. Timed attacks, blocks, and dodges are key here, but it's a much faster foray than what you might find in something like Salt and Sanctuary. One small example that yet has a significant impact on the game's pace is your inability to indefinitely hold up your shield. It's a timed guard that, if timed right, results in a momentary stun on your enemy, granting you the opportunity to go on the offensive. There's no riposts here. Precision and speed is the name of the game, evidenced by Motion Twin's plan for a time attack mode, as well as by the presence of in-game doors that will close forever if the player doesn't reach them in time. For example, a door in the ramparts leads to a room full of riches, but is permanently locked if the player doesn't make it there by the 4-minute mark. It's incredibly satisfying to blaze through a dungeon, ducking and weaving through enemy attacks and exploding them into a shower of gems and upgrades with well-timed counter-assaults. It's visceral, and for the most part, every single weapon and spell possesses a unique identity in how they handle, and they all feel like they pack a wallop. The biggest compliment I can pay with regards to the combat is that I never felt like I was treated unfairly by the game. I always knew where I messed up and how better to handle myself for the next time, which directly resulted in noticeable improvement. Dark Souls indeed. Dead Cells is honestly a treat for any fan of pixel art. The environments are beautifully drawn and animated, and possess a surprisingly bright and vibrant palette given their dark nature. This works to the game's benefit as a punishing roguelite, as an optimistic color scheme is more inviting. Seeing my unlocks displayed above me in gaudy glass jars generates feelings of both pride and determination, and will undoubtedly appeal to completionists who will want to finish their collection. The levels themselves are procedurally generated, but done so with carefully designed chunks so as to maintain the illusion of a meticulously crafted world, whilst ensuring a new experience is had every time it's explored. This process vaguely reminded me of Bethesda's modular design approach to the dungeons of Skyrim, albeit we see it here on a much smaller scale. Dead Cells possesses just as many secrets, though. I honestly can't think of anything outstanding to criticize Motion Twin for with Dead Cells. 2 tile sets, a boss, and a dozen or so unlocks have kept me occupied for nearly 9 hours, and that's not even touching this game's potential for speed and challenge runs. Ultimately, Dead Cells is a beautiful combination of everything that made games like Symphony of the Night and Salt and Sanctuary great, packaged here as something brand new that nevertheless possesses a pleasant feeling of familiarity thanks to the obvious love Motion Twin has for its spiritual forebears. You can pick it up for yourself when it launches on Steam Early Access May 10th. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like, and if you want to know more about upcoming indie games, be sure to subscribe to the channel and throw me a follow on Twitter @BrokeGlasses. My name's Kevin Ryan, and thanks for watching.